Hello, my name is Justin McCarthy. I'm a lawyer in Massachusetts, and today I want to make a video talking about relevant evidence. Relevant evidence is any evidence that helps to prove or disprove a disputed fact at trial. Generally, all relevant evidence is admissible at trial, and all irrelevant evidence is inadmissible. So let's say, for instance, you have a plaintiff suing a hotel because the plaintiff fell in the lobby of the hotel. An at issue at trial is whether the lobby was properly maintained on the day that the plaintiff slipped and fell. Evidence that the hotel's maintenance man called in sick from work on the day of the incident would be relevant because it would help prove that the lobby was not maintained properly when the plaintiff fell. On the other hand, let's say in the same case that the plaintiff wanted to introduce evidence that the defendant hadn't paid taxes in the last 3 years. That would be most likely irrelevant and inadmissible because it doesn't help prove or disprove a fact that's of consequence in the case. Now, like I said, generally relevant evidence is admissible. However, it's inadmissible if it violates the Constitution, if it violates statutory law, or if it violates any of the rules of evidence. And the most common example of relevant evidence that violates evidence rules is when the evidence, the probative value of the evidence is substantially outweighed by the prejudicial effect it may create among jurors. So let's say, for instance, you have a defendant on trial for drinking and driving, and the prosecution has evidence that 5 years earlier the defendant had been arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct. The prosecution could argue that there's some probative value to that evidence because it shows a history of alcoholism or alcohol abuse by the defendant. However, its value as evidence in demonstrating that the defendant actually did in fact drink and drive is very minimal. And the possibility that it will create an unfair prejudice among jurors is substantial. So in other words, the jury could end up convicting the defendant simply based on his prior behavior. Right? The court doesn't want that to happen. So if the probative value of the evidence is outweighed by the risk of unfair prejudice among jurors, then the evidence will be excluded from trial. And it's always the judge who will make the decision as to whether evidence is relevant and as to whether it's admissible or inadmissible. And the trial judge is given a great deal of discretion and will almost never be overruled by appellate courts. Okay, so that's it on relevant evidence. If you have any questions, give me a call or send me an email. I'd be happy to answer your questions for you. Thanks so much. Take care.